We're back with Bev Eagy of the ANZAC Tea Parlour. And during the break, Bev was telling me a little bit about how things are pronounced in Australia. She spent many years in Australia, and we want to talk about that. You had said that in Australia, many things are shortened up and almost like funny little names, like football is footy and breakfast is brekkie and things like that. And your last name is Eagy. And so...
Well, when my husband, Alan, who's I mentioned before he's like a saint because he lets me have a tea parlor in our home, for crying out loud. His last name's Eagy, and my friends in Australia, he was my pen pal. I mean, it's a little long story, but I tell people in the tea parlor, if they are curious about anything personal, I say, "Ooh, that's a high tea story."
Oh,
and they usually don't buy the high tea, so I get out of that. But anyway, they said, "Oh dear, Eggy." It was like saying I'm going to be Mrs. Egg. Why would you do that, dear? Oh dear.
Yeah.
But
I think that's a cute story. I want to know why ANZAC, why that name, and does that stand for something? Is that what's
it's
the
an
deal
acronym, Australia New Zealand Army Corps. And when I first moved back to America, after 20 years overseas, and my son Brian said, you should sell. He's an entrepreneur. He's an amazing boy. He said they don't have cookies or biscuits, which is a cookie, as good as an ANZAC biscuit. That's what you should do. You should make those and sell them. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. And then we lickety split. He's up at the college. He organizes the commercial kitchen. He designs a label. He kind of shoved his mom into it. So I was like the ANZAC biscuit lady making these cookies, and I sold them. I was flim-flamming those all through the gorge, and I still have places that that want my ANZACs. I used to send them up to Seattle to different people, and so I was some people knew me as the ANZAC biscuit lady, and so when I had worked my way into opening the tea parlor several years later, I just kept the name.
Okay, so that's where it came from. But it does actually stand for something over there. It's the Army
And it
Corps.
does. I was like making it all about me. But there is a story in Australia. It's Australia New Zealand Army Corps, and so that cookie or biscuit was invented in World War I in Australia, and it was sent over to Gallipoli to the diggers or the soldiers. They were sending the wives and sweethearts and and moms were all sending packages to the soldiers, and it would take several months by ship to get to Turkey, to Gallipoli, and by that time a lot of it wasn't that fresh, didn't taste that good. So they just invented this cookie with coconut and rolled oats and golden syrup, and that's the secret ingredient I still have sent out from Sydney. And that's what makes it taste, so...
Golden syrup.
Golden syrup.
It's
a cane sugar syrup. It's just... A lot of Commonwealth countries have golden syrup. There's one in Canada, and there's a Lyle's from England that's actually you can get in different places, gourmet shops in the States. It's a different color, but the flavor is very similar to the Australian. But I get the authentic Aussie golden syrup. Anyway, by the time I got there, those cookies still taste pretty good. They're kind of they're a delicious thing.
So the style of cooking in Australia, and you were there for how long?
20 years.
20 years. So the style of cooking in Australia versus the American style of cooking, is there a difference?
There's not a huge difference in the style of cooking. There's some of the baking is a little more old-fashioned, like the leavening would be baking soda and things that would sort of froth up, and it's a little bit different. And it's all metric, so that's kind of takes some getting used to.
Okay.
But it's all pretty much fresh. If you went to someone's home in Australia, you just go to the door and they'd say, "Oh, I'll just put the kettle on." They drop everything, and they would have something that they'd baked. And if they had store-bought biscuits or cookies, it would be this, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I mean, it's like so ashamed that they didn't bake it fresh. Or they'd have a lovely fruit cake, which I know most Americans don't like fruit cake, but...
Is their fruit cake better over there or down there?
It's delicious. You become a fan of fruit cake there. Yeah, it's really, really good.
I'll have to try that because I'm certainly not a fan of fruit cake.
Well, I think in America there's just one fruit cake that just keeps being gifted around. I don't know.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
But they're very moist and good. But anyway, they'd always have something that they'd serve, and they'd make you a nice fresh pot of tea, and then they'd just sit there and talk to you and
you get to listen to that beautiful accent.
of the Australian
Yes.
accent. Yeah, it's a nice thing. I never picked up one bit of accent, so
Really?
most people don't realize that they'd think I had just arrived the whole 20 years. I'd get in a taxi and they'd take me around the world and I'd go, wait a minute, buddy, I'd go this way.
Yeah.
But my children have that accent, and it's a.
So why were you there for 20 years? What were you doing? Were you cooking there, or were you doing something else?
I've always, cooked, but I married an Australian back in the 70s, went over there.
Okay.
And then I had two beautiful kids, and just had a life in Australia, in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah. Now, did you also do some theater work or something over there?
Well, the last few years I was in Australia, about the last 3 or 4 years, I ran a theater for a children's theater called Drama Kids, and I directed productions and things.
Okay.
Before I went to Australia, I actually worked at the Seattle Repertory Theater as a stage manager. So
Really?
I had our assistant stage manager back then. So I've
So
always
that's
kind
why
of
you're
had a little.
so good at this.
Well, I don't know about thank you very much, John. I just kind of.
All right, we got to take another break. We'll be right back. Well, I want to ask Bev a bit about some of her community involvement and some of the things that she's done through her shop. And so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.